in the three records of Jesus' great prophetic message, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. Jesus not only speaks of signs in the earth, but he speaks of signs in the heavens. These signs indicate things that are happening in the invisible realm. See, the story of man was quite literally presented in the stars. Because when God established the stars, the constellations of the heavens, he did so with the intent that they be his signboard for nations. It's only recently that humans do not have much of an interest in the stars. Before that, and especially in ancient societies, the message of the stars was critical to the ancients' understanding of signs and seasons. For example, in ancient Babylon, we know from the book of Daniel that there were astrologers and soothsayers who were regular parts of the king's court. In ancient Egypt, it was the same. And even as recent in human history, that is, as Rome, the process of determining the future was to look at the stars and to engage in augury. In times that were more recent than those, humans attempted to navigate the uncharted seas by the stars of the heavens. So until all but the most recent of times, the stars of the heavens played a critical role in the understanding of major events in human history. I believe this was so because even though ancient societies did not have a relationship to the true God, they had their gods, there was still the memory of things that God revealed to ancient man from the days of Adam on down, that continued in the families of man, derived, of course, which families found their origins, of course, from the first man and the first woman. So the knowledge of the stars was critically important to the evolution of thought and understanding in ancient societies. They in fact believed, for example, the Romans believed that the stars portended such important things as the death of princes. We remember the famous line from the play Julius Caesar, where in the Elizabethan era, Shakespeare, being cognizant of how the ancients saw the stars, was said to have put the words in the mouths of one of his characters. And the words from Julius Caesar, the play, are, "When beggars die, there are no comets seen, but the heavens themselves blaze forth the death of princes." And so it was believed that a comet in the sky was an ill omen to princes. The point is that with the coming of modern science, everything seeks a rational explanation, and there are many things that do not have a rational explanation. But God, knowing that there would be events that would occur in the heavens that would have unimaginably stunning results for the earth, told us that there would be signs seen in the heavens above, signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars. So let's look at this. Matthew 24, By the way, these are the words of Jesus himself. They're even in red letter in your Bible. Matthew 24, 29. Jesus says, immediately after the distress of those days, number one, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Those four things again. The sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. This is an important question. The heavenly bodies will be shaken. What's that? What does that mean? What is the indication here? What are the bodies in the heavens that will be shaken? Look at this. This is from the book of Hebrews and the 12th chapter. It's a quote from the Old Testament. Hebrews 12, the very last verses say the following. If they did not escape, that's Hebrews 12:25. See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, how much less will it be if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven? Did you see that? Let me read it again. It says, see to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. In other words, do not ignore the one who is speaking. If they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on the earth, or on earth, how much less will we if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven? So there are warnings that come from the earth, but even more dire warnings come from the heavens. Verse 26. At that time, his voice shook the earth. That is, when he warned from the earth, his voice shook the earth. Can you think of any event in human history where men were warned from the earth? Well, how about the flood? 120 years while the ark was being prepared. And no one paid attention. What were the consequences? The world was drowned, except 8. But he says, as bad as that was, and that's just one of the warnings of impending judgments that God gives on the earth. We've just gotten through speaking about signs on the earth and the terrible catastrophes that are coming on the earth, some of which are already happening. But he says, if you think that's something, if you ignore him who speaks from heaven, who warns from heaven, that's even worse. Well, it means that the warnings that are coming from heaven are meant to be much worse than the warnings that come from the earth. And he quotes from the book of Numbers, chapter 24, verse 17. It's quoted here in Hebrews 12. At that time, his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The word once more indicates the removing of what can be shaken. In other words, he's not just shaking the heavens, he's removing things that can be shaken. From where? From the heavens, because that's the subject. That's the venue in question. The removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. So apparently, there are created things in the heavens which can be shaken, which will be shaken. And the signs of these created things in the heavens that can be shaken and removed from the heavens, the sign that this is happening will appear in the sun, the moon, and the stars. Fascinating. Let me speak that again, because sometimes, you see, we think that the only created things in the heavens are the things that are visible, such as the planets, the sun, the moon, and the stars. But he's telling us there are other created things in the heavens which are to be removed from the heavens. The powers of the heavens will be shaken. These things are referred to as powers of the heavens. So it's clearly not a reference to inanimate things like planets. It's in the planets, in the configuration of the constellations, and in the behavior of the visible heavens, the sun, the moon, and the stars, that we will know when the created things that are in the heavens, which are described as powers that can be shaken, are being shaken so as to be removed. So it raises the first question, what are these things if they're not the sun, the moon, and the stars? Well, begin with this truth. There are three heavens. This is what Paul says when he writes to the Corinthians in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, where he says, I knew a man 14 years ago who was, whether he was in the body or out of the body, I do not know, but he was caught up to the third heavens. So we know there are three heavens. Now, in each of these heavens or realms, there are obviously multiple dimensions. We know of at least three of the dimensions in our realm. For example, in the realm of the earth, there are at least these three dimensions. There's the dimension of width, of height, and there's height and depth as one, length and breadth, and width. Now, there are other factors that for example, architects and engineers have to take into consideration, such as vector factors, the forces of aging over time. And the scientists tell us now, as they look into the realm of the subatomic, they're discovering many other dimensions. And in fact, they claim to some extent that they are discovering the dimensions that are the thin curtains between the realms of the natural and the realms of the supernatural. Einstein and Infeld in the 30s were theorizing about this when they were young professors. They theorized that if you would move an object beyond the speed of light, that it would disappear from measurable quantifications, but would not cease to exist. In other words, the universe as we know it is bound by the speed of light, because it's what allows us to measure and note the existence of objects in proximity to each other within this realm. But their theory was if you move an object beyond the speed of light, it would not cease to exist, but it would simply enter a different realm. Now, that may be one of the many dimensions within this realm, these heavens that surround this earth. Or it may be that we are moving toward that thin veil between the different dimensions, such as the second heavens and the highest heavens. What lies in the second heavens and what lies in the third heavens? If you measure these things from the proximity to earth, the third or highest heavens would be the heavens of God, where the throne of God is, and from where the influence of God over all that is emanates. Paul apparently was caught up to the third heavens. wonderful and incredible things are in the third heavens. We have glimpses into the reality of the third heavens. For example, did you know that there are books in the third heavens that are referred to as the book of truth, or the book of life, or the book that records the lives of everyone? These are things plainly spoken in the scriptures. For example, in the book of Daniel, when Daniel is visited by the archangel Gabriel, Gabriel tells him, "Daniel, I have come to tell you what was written in the book of truth, for you are highly favored." And apparently, the angels all had access to the book of truth. And that becomes important at a point further on in this message. We are told that in the book of Revelation, the 20th chapter, that at the end of the age, the books are opened, and the dead are judged out of the things that are written in the books. And finally, we're told that there is a book that refers to the select, the elect. It's called the Lamb's Book of Life. Marvelous insights. In fact, Paul said when he was in the third heavens, he saw things that were prohibited to man. So when he came back to the earth, he was out of his body. He said, whether I was in the body or out of the body, I cannot tell. So he was in another state of being. He saw incredible things, some of which he was not permitted to tell. Now, that's a glimpse into heaven, a real glimpse into heaven, not necessarily a Dantean glimpse into Paradiso, but a real glimpse into heaven. Books that contain truth, immutable truth known from the foundations of the world, pursuant to which truths the existence of man was framed. These are in heaven. What's in the second heavens? If these things are in the highest heavens, and we know what's in the natural heavens, the ones around the earth or the first heavens, the planets are there. What's in the second heavens? Plainly spoken, in the book of Ephesians, the 6th chapter, speaking on the matter of spiritual warfare, Paul the writer says to the Ephesians, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers," note that word, powers, "the rulers of the darkness of this world, and the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." What's in the second heavens? The entire demonic realm, the seat of Satan himself, and the seat of that which resists God. Originally, it was this was in the highest heavens. But when God created man and he created the universe, he also created the heavens and the earth. And in one of the heavens, the demonic, which used to be in heaven but lost its original battle, is now placed in the second heavens. I have a series of messages entitled God's Heirs, and we look at why was the battle engaged in the first place? Why did the angels revolt against God in the first place? But that's available to you for downloading from the website, so you might look at it. But they were first in the highest heavens, then they were put into the second heavens. But the war continues. And so the scriptures say in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, there was war in heaven. Chapter 12, verse 7, there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. Now you may say, well, that was the original war when Satan was driven out of heaven. But we now know that he's not on the earth. He presently is not on the earth. He is now called the prince of the power of the air. He's now referred to as the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. So he's still in the heavenlies. But after this war, this second round, see, the war does not end, had not ended because he was put out of the first heavens. This war will end when the last enemy has been destroyed. And according to the book of Revelation, the 20th chapter, who the last enemy is and when he will be destroyed and how he'll be destroyed is stated. The last enemy is death, the spirit known as death. That's the last enemy. And he'll be destroyed at the end of the age, at the end of the millennial period, and he'll be thrown into a lake of fire. That's when the war will end, when the last enemy has been destroyed. This war continues. It obviously continues. Otherwise, why are we talking about spiritual warfare in the first place? Every church group talks about spiritual warfare, but if you say this is the continuing war that began when there was an original revolt, and it will end when the last enemy has been destroyed, and so the war is ongoing, people look at you strangely. Well, why are we having spiritual warfare if the war is over? It's obvious that the war is not over. We continue to fight. But that creation, and it is a creation, because the angels are created beings, they're not eternal beings, they're created. Satan was a created being, is a created being, just like man is a created being. But they're creatures of different dimensions. Man is a creature of time. These creatures are creatures of another dimension. So they are in the heavenly realms. And they have revolted against God, and the war continues, and it's now time to deal with them again. You see, the end of the age is just that. It's the culmination of the purposes for which man was created. And the culmination of these purposes invariably draws the demonic realm into focus, whereas now they're invisible and they enjoy a certain anonymity because of invisibility, yet they have continued to engage in war against God, and they have continued to engage in war against the interest of God in the earth, which interests are humankind. As the age concludes, all of these things will come into focus, and we'll have a culmination of the entire affair. So that's what Jesus was speaking about when he said, "And the powers of the heavens shall be shaken." Look at the rest of this reading from Revelation 12. In Revelation 12, it says, there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. They were, and they are now in the second heaven, but this is where they'll end up. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent. See, here Satan is referred to as the dragon, the ancient serpent, who's called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. Where was he hurled down to? He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Note that. Where is he thrown? He's now in the heavens. Where is he thrown when he's thrown out of the heavens? He's thrown into the earth. When God shakes the heavens, what he intends to do is remove that which may be shaken. Everything that can be shaken will be shaken. We have received the only thing that cannot be shaken, and that is a kingdom. When he shakes the heavens, he will remove the things that can be shaken, and he'll put them into the earth. But that was the matter from the beginning. God always knew this. This is not going to be now a happenstance of the later years. Look at this from the book of Numbers. This is an interesting quote from the book of Numbers. And this would be Numbers 24 17. Here the Lord says, I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel. And so God promises that out of Israel there would come this incredible providence of God for the whole purpose of man at the end of the age. It goes on to say in the book of Zechariah that God will shake everything that can be shaken so that what cannot be shaken will remain. How do we know when these things that can be shaken are being shaken? You see, this is still the invisible realm, but what comes out of it will affect us. How will we know the timing when the heavens are being shaken? The answer is these things will be symbolized in the sun, the moon, and the stars. That's how we'll know. There'll be signs of these things appearing in the sun, the moon, and the stars. You've got to stay with us for the next broadcast to understand the appearing in the sun, the moon, and the stars of the signs of these incredible events. Do you suppose that the enemy thrown into the earth will shake things up a bit when he gets here? Do you think human society will be different if Satan is in residence on the planet in the dominant role? That's what we need to look at. The end of the age will come, and these will be the things. The stars will show the way. I'm Sam Solen. Join me for a continuing discussion. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Broken body, broken bread, blood turned wine, life for the dead. Surrender to Jesus your thoughts and your cares. Come walk with us and meet Jesus here. Broken body, broken bread, blood turned wine, life for...
Hi, I'm Sam Solen. I'm the host of the preceding program. We bring you these messages to encourage you in your walk with God. If you'd like a copy of this message, you may obtain it in one of two ways. You may obtain it by writing to me at the address on the screen, indicating what program that you desire, or the alternative is to visit our website at www.solen.com. You may download it for free. Either way, it's without cost to you, so feel free to write. If you'd like to know what's going on in the ministry, sign up on the website for our newsletter. Thank you, and God bless you. Bye-bye.